question. So, Mr. Lindell, can you please tell us about your job as Vice Principal of People and Organizational Development and what it specifically entails?
Yeah, I'm happy to. Actually renamed that role quite recently just to more accurately reflect the role. It's now called VP of People and Culture, because the aspect of anyone working in human resources, it's really all about what we refer to as people, would obviously be the ones that you refer to as being your teachers and faculty. And then you also know that we have a really important staff functions too that are supporting you. Obviously have interviewed already people from the advancement group, and we obviously have admissions, we have from student life and well-being, we have the finance group, we have the IT group, we have a lot of really important administrative roles around the college too. And really the role of my role is really to ensure that we have a very inclusive culture and really positive working climate that then would be transpiring into what you've experienced in the classroom as students. And so there's several ways you can look at human resources or the people and culture function. One aspect is that you can look at it from what I refer to as the employee life cycle. It really starts with how we attract new teachers, new staff to come to UCC, to consider UCC as a place for them to work. And then after that, it obviously goes through a recruitment process where really HR, and that's me together with Tamia Gador, who is my HR manager, we would always make sure that we oversee the process all the way from when we post until we go through the interviews, until we make the offer. And then after that, we have an orientation where we make sure everyone gets the basic training of what it is important to know about working at UCC. And then we have an onboarding that is led by the department. And then after that, we have aspect of how we develop. That could be either through professional development, it could be through leadership training. We have something called the growth and evaluation process we run every year, where they get an opportunity to get feedback of doing continuous learning and continuous growth in their role. And then there is also an aspect of where we do aspect of what we call retention, the aspect of really looking at how can we make sure that we continue to be a great place to work. So one example there is our initiative to work with employee well-being. You know about student well-being because there's a lot of work that's been put there onto advising, but we work with employee well-being, one example there. And then of course, when someone leaves, if they retire, we also make sure that we have a smooth transition when they are looking at retiring, looking at their pensions. We always have an exit interview, making sure that we always capture inputs. So that is just a little bit in a nutshell. And of course, there's other aspect of in HR, you work both operationally, day-to-day supporting employees and leaders, tactically, where you work with different cycles in the year, where you work with growth and evaluation process of goal setting beginning of the year. We have a recruitment season that starts in January. We have different type of surveys. And then we have strategical initiatives that needs to be planned. So for me, working in a small department, and as we might be touched upon later, I've worked in much bigger organizations before. I really have to work operationally, tactically, and strategically really throughout the day. So hopefully that answered a little bit your question.
Yeah, so moving to the next question, can you please walk us through your typical day and how COVID has changed your schedule? And
sure, I'm happy to do that. So a typical schedule, just to tie into a little bit what I mentioned before, it would always be the balance of the operational, the tactical and strategical. So day to day, my role will be a lot about meeting with employees and also other organizations that are supporting us working on the aspect of the HR agenda that we have. So that could either be joint health and safety committee meeting. It could be meeting because I'm part of the senior leadership team, which is led by Principal McKinney. So we meet on a very regular basis. I meet with my colleagues in my senior leadership group. So that would be one aspect. And then it's also individual meetings with leaders. So in group settings and individual meetings that we would be that we will ensure that we keep going. And then of course we have this kind of what I mentioned about these reoccurring things that happens in the year. So like for instance now, a week now for me would be I'm doing a couple of interviews every week for new roles. So if a teacher retires, for an example, we then have to recruit a replacement for that. And so then I'm sitting in on, so for one posting, it could be in the beginning, it could be up to 5-6 interviews and then second round of interviews. So that's something that would keep me busy. And beginning of the academic year, we would always do a review of our policies. So we would have all the employees signing off on that. So that's a process that we would work with. So those are sort of some examples. And of course, there's an element sometimes of reporting into the Board of Governors that HR once a year will be doing an annual report where we really give an update on strategic priorities, what we have been working on, making sure that they are attuned with. So like for instance, this last year, we've had a priority of working with employee well-being, of leadership development, and previous years we also worked with implementing a new human resource information system. So, and when it comes to COVID specifically, a lot of things have shifted to online, as it has for all of you. And so now we're doing a lot more interviews. Like for instance, we don't do any in-person interviews, we do them online. And so we have shifted a lot of training we do. The leadership training that we had for all our leaders, we have about 45 that have people reporting into them. We've run 2 cohorts of leadership training. We pivoted the training that we did 2 years ago in person, worked with Sick Kids, which is our strategic leadership development partner, and we adapted the training like you adapted of going from being in the classroom. We adapted that training to deliver online too. And when it came to COVID, we obviously did a lot of things when it came to helping all our both faculty and staff to transition to the teachers were trained on how to work with the cameras, how to work with the new system, working with Brightspace. And as you know, with any new system, there's always a learning curve. And I think really throughout the year, there's been a lot of practice of utilizing that. And I think the faculty has done an absolutely unbelievable job kind of pivoting into this new environment, like all the departments, including all the staff functions that in finance, in advancements, in admissions, in student life well-being, they have all adapted to new ways of working and collaborating using new online platforms. And so yeah, so hopefully that answers a little bit that question.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, Mr. Lindell. I mean, we can all agree that this year has been a really, really tough year. And then, I mean, undeniably, like, you know, the morale of the entire, like, I guess, school and like, especially the teachers, there's a lot of like burden when it comes to transitioning to the whole online platform. From personal experience, I know that it's a lot of pressure on a teacher. So as, you know, someone who's in charge of like, you know, building organizational culture, like boosting morale, like what are some of the strategies you and your team were able to use to kind of keep the morale high during, you know, such dire circumstances over COVID?
I think that's a great question that really, like any organization has been asking themselves. And I've been working with HR colleagues within the independent school community, but also I'm part of forums of CHROs, that's Chief Human Resource Officers in other industries, and really have been sharing a lot of practices, learning together and being a great camaraderie within the HR community, sharing ideas. And I can mention a couple of things that we have been doing. We started about 2 years ago called an Employee Wellbeing Committee. It falls on the umbrella of the overall Wellbeing Committee that includes student well-being. In the Employee Wellbeing Committee, we have representation from functions both from the preparatory and the upper school, and some of them also includes from the school psychologist and also counselors part of that. And we have worked on 4 themes of well-being. we started the year with something called social well-being. And we did a couple of initiatives of making sure that everyone sort of stayed connected. We were especially, part of that was the new faculty that came on board. We actually teamed up, every single one got a buddy from the employee wellbeing committee. So they got one person that they got to know, someone they can ask and stay connected with sort of all the time. And then also we had staff that was working remotely because they needed to create space for faculty were taking, or they were borrowing their rooms so they could spread out. With physical distancing, that was important. So faculty took staff offices, so staff had to work from home. And we wanted to make sure that they were staying connected. The staff that was not over a longer period of time could come into the college. And then we created a informal community of people getting together on a regular basis, of creating like a social circle, making sure that everyone felt that they had someone, if it wasn't just relying on the committees in the sense of meeting with the departments. So there was a lot of different activities on that. Then we went over to financial well-being, because what was proven from one of the we work with an organization called Mon Chapelle that works with something called Employee Family Assistance Program. And they were sharing data with us, the importance of financial well-being. That I think the statistics said that you were 4 times likely to be affected on your mental well-being if you were having struggles with your financial well-being. So we ran a couple of workshops, both on how to work with your financial basics when it comes to your personal finances, about retirement planning, and also for pension, both for the staff pension and for the teacher pension, teaching everyone on how to make sure that you plan for your finances appropriately. So that was during the winter, sort of, that was kind of November, December. Then the darkest time of the year, during January, February, we had a focus on mental well-being. And we were running a series of, we were doing, and this was throughout the year, we do a weekly mindfulness. And Miss Herb, that you might know from other, she was running that. And then we were also running other sort of workshops. We run weekly things of, for instance, I don't know if you heard about gratitude journal. The people were going to do a gratitude journal, write down every day something that what they appreciate, look at things from a positive point of view, and expressing gratitude. And they were also about doing a journal of reaching out to others that you might not have spoken to in a while, again encouraging people to do it. And these were all based on best practices that there are different trainings on kind of well-being. So we're taking the best practices of how to boost. And then the last but not least, now in the back end of the year, we have now gone over to the 4th theme of physical well-being. So now we have done a step challenge. You can either do individually or in groups. And we had more than 25% of all the employees getting involved in this. And people have been doing a lot more walking and taking care of their physical well-being, because again, physical well-being is also linked to mental health. All of these dimensions are linked to one another. So this has been just one way. There are other things. We updated policies and benefits to make sure that people could access mental health resources. We expanded the scope of not just our benefits cover psychologists. They can go to a social worker, psychotherapist, that's a bit cheaper. We broadcasted out the opportunity to do CBT, cognitive behavior therapy, online, promoting that as accessibility. So that's just some examples of how we really were wanting to take care of a really most important thing that we have in the school, the students and the staff, and making sure that they were taken care of so they can take good care of you.
Yeah, Mr. Lindell. So we saw that you've extensive experience leading different projects and leading different teams at a number of different companies. So we wanted to ask you, what's something you learned from all of these leadership experiences in terms of like leading people and and kind of sharing a vision for something?
Well, first and foremost, that what I've learned is like anything is possible if you have surround yourself with the right people and really talk about a vision for where you want to reach. I mean, one example there I can talk about during my 16 years within IKEA, which some of you might know. It's a Swedish sort of home furnishing company. I was very fortunate to work in projects. I actually went across different parts of the world, from Asia, going to Shanghai, going to India, and then working out of continental Europe, working with North America, and having that opportunity to do. And so parallel to that, I was running a team of 25 people that were responsible for a global supply chain. And this was specifically within textiles. So I was responsible for global supply chain for textiles for IKEA. At the same time, parallel to be responsible for that team that was based out of a small town in southern Sweden, I'm trying to think of Walmart, because they come from a small town too. And this was the IKEA equivalent in a small town in the southern part of Sweden. So in an agricultural setting, I was traveling the world, but living in a small town. And from there, I was running these sort of projects and really working with, really making sure that you develop a plan, making sure you resource the project appropriately. Because a lot of times we might take on too much, parallel to having a day-to-day duties of the job, making sure you secure that up front. And then you take a lot of time making sure you plan things properly, really take the time up front to do as much as you can to do the planning. And one really important thing I learned about the successful project, obviously you need to make sure that you keep it within time, within budget, and deliver it to the quality matrix that you have set out to do. But actually, what I've learned over the times is one of the most important aspects is also to consider the change management part of it. You have project methodology, making sure the task gets done, but you need to look at the people side of it, which is the change management methodology. So if I recommend you, if you would be interested in running projects, making sure that you both learn project methodology, but also change management methodology, because you can make a change happen, but how do you make it stick? How do you make sure that the people are coming along with you, and that you need to do both. You need to make sure that you have both those methodologies working in tandem together and not separate, and make sure you resource both, and make sure the person responsible for the project is also responsible for the change management.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes sense. I want to kind of dive deeper into your 16 years at IKEA. So I know you worked as a global supply manager, especially for textiles. It got me really interested. Can you tell us about, like, I guess the whole supply chain of IKEA, and like how are you able to manage like the whole supply chain? It's a multinational company. Like, just tell us more about like kind of your job there.
How much time do we have? Do you have a couple of hours? Yeah. Yeah. If I would give it a little bit in a nutshell. So I actually came from working in Canada. I actually moved to Canada twice. I came to Canada, worked as the regional logistics manager for Canada, and working on benchmarking with all the North American stores, also working with the US stores in IKEA. So I worked on the retail side. Then when I went back to Sweden, then I worked on that global supply chain. And so that was a job I had never done before. I had worked on the kind of back end of the supply chain when it came to selling to the customer, or making sure the goods were available in an IKEA store. If you've been to one of these big blue and yellow buildings, that's what I was focusing on then. When I came there, I had to work together with people that were working with purchasing, that were securing the contracts globally of securing where the goods were actually being produced. So I worked together with those strategic purchasers, together with the product developers that were developing new products, because IKEA always came with new products. And then I then represented the aspect of making sure that the goods were available at the lowest price, making sure, working with forecasting. So I had people responsible for something called need planning and demand planning, making sure that we were accurate when it came to that. So I basically started with a team. I had to learn, I had learned the logistics part because that was my second career. I started as a management accountant and worked a bit as a financial consultant. Working in supply chain was my second kind of career. HR is now my third. I was then really working with ensuring I understood this global supply chain. So it was really about understanding, taking my transferable skills and work on a retail side. And I looked at the team that I had, and I really looked at, are the right people in the right roles? Are they clear of their role and how I can get the most out of the best self from each and every one of this team? Because they were underperforming when I was there. We had many weeks of stock weeks, and that's not good when you have logistics. They were poor service level in different regions. After I left, I think I was there for 3.5 years, we had reduced the stock weeks dramatically, but at the same time increased the availability of goods. So if you think about that combination, and with a more motivated team, and that was really about taking the time to deploy people in the right roles. So after 6 months there, I redeployed the employees. I didn't fire anyone. I basically looked at what are their strengths, what are their passions, what are the best situated to take. So the people who are most advanced in their role took the biggest business areas that was most business critical, where the most money was. And then I deployed them in different aspects of it, and then really worked with them on how to develop them, give them the confidence to do it. And then I created a new benchmark. They didn't have how they could evaluate the service level and stock weeks. I created a new dashboard. I found out about one guy who had done it on the purchasing side. I said, hey, can you help me? I know you've done this on that side. So before, they really couldn't see how they were doing. And once you knew what was not working, then we focused on the purchasing side. Where did we have issues with suppliers not delivering on time? And then I could look at, okay, India, we need to work with them. We need to support them on how they can be better. Went out there, met some of the key suppliers. And then we had an issue with France and Spain about availability of goods in the stores. And then, okay, so what are we doing wrong there? Okay, the demand planning is out of sync. Okay, let's focus on making sure that we take care of those regions, because they have had a big sales development, and that included France too. So that's how we, and obviously a lot of other things that was done, but that's how I kind of approached it, and always with a learning mindset. Really, in the sense, in the beginning, I had a grasp of, and I had some transferable skills, but I learned fast, and I admitted when I didn't know, but then I was very quick to make sure that I learned and prioritized, did what I call the 80-20 rule. It always applies. If you focus on the 20% that's most important, it takes care of 80% of the issues. And if you're going to develop and get results, 80% impacting that by focusing on 20, you will always come out as a winner when you do that. So prioritize will be a key aspect there.
Thank you, Mr. Lindell. It seems like you can really go on for hours if there's no time limit. But yeah, just switching gears. We know you also led a 4-year campus accreditation, kind of like a project for the ACICS. Mm-hmm. So we just want you, can you please talk about your experience leading that project?
So just to correct, the 4-year accreditation, it was that we were given a 4-year accreditation, but the actual project itself was about 18 months to prepare for it. But it was still a big project, because accreditations, you probably have heard about, there's a lot of different accreditations out there, and you probably will go into an industry where there's some sort of industry benchmark. And this was in education, where it was hundreds of standards that needed to be put in place. And in preparation for, after 18 months, a 2-day visit where they would be looking at all these standards, write a report. So again, it was all about project management, making sure we were working very closely together with our US sister organization. So having worked in Canada, I've worked a lot with American organizations too. So it was really about initially to really teach everyone what are all those standards and what does it take, and then really plan it out over an 18-month period. So every single week had a new task that you needed to achieve. And then it was really to stay focused over a longer period of time and constantly invest in the people, developing them in understanding more what was required. And then when that day came, I can remember walking to the office that day. I'm like 18 months, and it's just down to these 2 days. I was nervous, but we passed and we got the accreditation. And but it was all a teamwork. It's always about teamwork. How do you get the most out of the people that you work with and make them motivate? You can never do things alone.
Yeah, so you've obviously had so much experience in a variety of occupations. So you were on the retail side for many years, and then also HR. So what made you want to like pivot your career to come to work at UCC?
Yeah, that was a journey to get to that point. So that requires a little bit of going back in my history. Before I came to UCC, I really looked at, I had a moment there when I was transitioning over to also make an HR career that then became my third career. And I was looking at where am I spending a lot of my time when I did my volunteer work. And I looked back like 6-7 years, and I'm like, okay, I was sitting on this board for the Montessori school that my kids went to in Sweden. And then when we came to Canada, I then went on to the board of the Swedish language school that they had here in Toronto. And then I also volunteered. I was part of, because I'm a partially trained psychotherapist too, not a fully, and there I was the chair. I was a member of the board and the chair of the board, and that was a college. And I'm like, I'm spending all this time in education, and there's a little bit of history that was just naturally because I wanted just to be part of that. But then thinking back at it, okay, there's a little thing here running in the family. My mom was a teacher. She was a home economics teacher. You haven't had the opportunity to have home economics because I think they took that away many years ago. But my mom was that. And then my uncle, he was a phys ed teacher that later became a principal. So it's kind of always been in the family. I've always grown up talking about sort of school environment. And obviously, myself is on a lifelong learning. I've never stopped learning myself. I've always been continue to study. So education is in my blood. And then also my kids went to an IB school, both in Sweden and in Canada. And of course, UCC, who doesn't know about the great reputation of UCC? And now I talk about the great school, the opportunities that it gives all of you, the opportunity to do. And when the opportunity came, it was a perfect match with, my HR career and also my passion for education. And then when that opportunity came, I'm like, this is just too good to be true. And I was super nervous because I really, really wanted this job. And I was so happy because I was the first recruit of Principal McKinney when he started. And we will have our fifth year anniversary in August when we started at UCC. So so that's how I kind of pivoted into UCC.
Yeah, so you have so many years of experience leading different projects all around the world. So can you please tell us what has been your favorite experience and project so far?
I just want to say, it just came to me when I was reading your questions. I think they're so well thought out, and you guys have really taken the opportunity to really think them through. Kudos to all of you. So I'll answer that question, but this is another great question. I think there's two that comes to mind. I cannot single out one. I was supporting an aspect of setting up a new store in Edinburgh in Scotland, and had a great team that I worked with there. So we basically successfully set up the logistics operation in a new market, and the opportunity to do that with a small team, motivated team, working together, getting tangible results, and contributing to our, at that time, the company I was working for, the successful expansion into new market, working with great people that I kept contact with many years after, still to this day. And the other one is the global supply chain project that I did, that was benchmarking best-in-class processes throughout the whole supply chain, from production logistics to distribution logistics to retail logistics. We did something called staple and order. It was an idea I got from a Harvard Business Review article. How do you really analyze how goods travel from one part of the world. This was from a supplier outside Shanghai to a distribution center in Germany to then a store in Germany. So we stapled ourselves to one order to see what actually happens every single step of the way. So we went to a big port in Shanghai. We then went to when it arrived in Germany, when it was taken off the docks, when it came there, and really analyzed it real time in real life, and the learnings that we did from, and we then identified, okay, what was affecting availability, what was affecting cost, what was affecting reliability. And that was an awesome project. That was parallel to running a global team of 20 people. I did that project on a bit of a sideline. I was younger then. I would probably not do that parallel again at the same time.
Yeah, so you have so much experience working internationally. You mentioned just now Scotland, the UK, working with different countries, Germany, Spain, all of these international kind of actors. So we wanted to ask you, what are your thoughts on working internationally versus, just staying in Canada, for example?
That is a huge life choice to do, that me and my wife did quite early on in our careers, and me and my wife are quite different from probably a lot of other sort of families that we know, because we are a kind of a two-career family. So we've always been supporting one another, taking different steps. So when we came back to Canada the second time around, it was actually for my wife's career. I wasn't too bad off either. We were both kind of well taken care of when we did. But we started off before we had kids, and it was much easier to do that. So if it's something you're curious about, do it early on in your career, and you can do it when if you ever plan to have children, then you can travel until probably the time when the kids are about around 10. Then it becomes trickier to continue to do. It gives you such a richness of perspectives, cultures, what we today call pluralism, diversity. I've lived with that. That's been my experience having worked in global companies. When I worked in this little town in Älmhult in Sweden, I think, if I can remember correctly, I think we were from 22 different countries working in this team. So this what people are talking about now. I lived that reality over 20 years ago, and the understanding for people's different religions, their different traditions, the humbleness of me being I'm an immigrant to Canada. I became Canadian, I think it's now about, is it 7 years ago? And that respect that I have for other people's backgrounds. And so that has really taught me. We chose Toronto because my wife is from Finland, and my one child is born in Canada, one was born in England. My wife's from Finland, I'm from Sweden, but we choose Toronto because we think it's one of the best global cities in the world, where you can experience, like I'm doing with my older daughter now, we're actually experiencing cuisines from around the world. Where in the world can you do that in any other city to the extent we can do in Toronto? And so that was, and things will never be the same once you head out. And I never looked back since. I never moved back to my hometown in Stockholm after that. It became in my blood to constantly be curious about it. So you change a lot. Some of you might have moved abroad yourself, and when you go back to the people that have not traveled, they will not fully understand the scope of how you changed and what you have experienced, because it's really hard to explain for others. So for instance, if you have moved from either from Asia, from Europe to North America, or vice versa, it's really hard to explain to others how you're affected by the different cultures and the experiences that you have. And it made me understand perspectives and be respectful of others, and not judge people just because they're different. Because I'm different. You hear my accent. I constantly get reminded of people are thinking, where are you from? Are they insinuating I'm not welcome here? Or is it that you're curious of really where I'm from? But that's something I've learned. So even though I used to be blonde, but I'm still blue-eyed, I've experienced this of being someone who's a little bit of an outsider, a bit of the odd one out. But I'm happy to be different, and I'm happy to have a different accent that no one else has.
Yeah, that's great. I myself have a little bit of an accent, and for those who want, like, to pursue your similar career path as you? What are some advices that you have for them?
Yeah, did some thinking about this question too. The one thing I'm thinking, you're all on the sort of you're finishing off high school. Probably most of you are considering going on to university. One thing you can think about the extent your career beyond you've gone to university, and that would be there's 4 different type of careers, and I learned this quite early on that there are 4 different ways that you can do your career. One is to be the specialist. You can be an accountant and you can be a really great specialist, or you can be, say, a lawyer and then be very good at a very narrow field and be, or if it's a doctor and you can be a specialist in a particular. That is a career that some people find a lot of enjoyment in. The other second type of career is one where you take on more responsibilities, where you want to make a career, you want to climb the corporate ladder, you want to take on bigger and bigger responsibilities, you want to have a bigger and bigger titles. So that's one type of career that you can do. The third one is what I call a transitional career. That is a career that every 5 to 10 years, you take all the things that you have learned and then you put it into a new industry or a new job. And then you reinvent yourself every 5 to 10 years, and then you do something different. And then you have the fourth one, which I call the job hopper. That's one where you go completely from completely not related industries and jobs, and you just try out different things. And for everyone, it's different. I think I have probably tried out all of those ones, but I can say that the one that probably defines my career the most is the one that is the transitional, where I move between industries and different kind of functions and different roles, and I reinvested myself and reinvented myself in new ways, and that's been very fulfilling for me, and it might not be for others, but knowing that these 4 different ways of making a career, and the other thing is always build on your self-awareness. Know what your own strengths are, your uniqueness, because you all are unique. You have a unique skill set, a unique personality, and you're going to develop unique competencies. Know what you're really good at. And then, if you're in a position of that you're in a team and you can choose your team, make sure you surround yourself with people that are different than you, that complements you. Because the biggest realization I learned was early on in my career, the people that annoyed me the most is actually the ones I needed the most. Someone that was detail orientated versus I was big picture, and there was always someone taking me down to the details. And initially I'm like, no. Now I've learned work with someone that complements you and appreciate them for their different perspectives. And I'm sure you've done group works at school, and you probably know what I'm referring to. Change your mindset. You actually learn most of those from that person that is so different from you, because you will meet them again and again in your career. And so if you learn to embrace what they bring that you don't have, and maybe they will also appreciate you for what you bring. And so that's, and then the third one, continuous learning. Never stop learning. I've constantly always parallel, when I did this global project and I were leading this team of 20 people, I actually studied to become a supply chain specialist. I knew I was not going to stay a specialist because I've always been a generalist, but I wanted to understand, and I continued. Then I did HR, and before then I obviously had a business degree. That's how I started. The first degree I had was what you would call commerce, from one of the oldest universities in Europe, founded in 1477. That's where it all started. And then it just evolved. And be open to opportunities. Your career path will hopefully be like mine. It just evolves. Jump on opportunities when they come, and try it out. You can always redefine yourself, and don't worry about what you're going to be studying now, because look at me, I'm plus 50 and I'm still studying and I'm still developing. So do whatever you think is right now, and then complement that with other things later on as you're growing up. So so that maybe is a bit of advice there.